Welcome to Legal Keys, unlocking time, revenue, and results. The podcast that connects you with the people, technologies, and trending topics shaping the modern legal landscape. From cutting-edge AI innovations to high-growth marketing strategies and everything in between. Legal Keys is your go-to resource for actionable insights. Brought to you by Faster Outcomes and hosted by Tim Sawyer, two-time Inc. 500 co-founder entrepreneur. We're here to help you navigate the tools and trends driving success in today's legal world.
Hello and welcome to Legal Keys. I'm your host, Tim Sawyer. I am so excited to be here today. Can't wait to introduce my guest. Legal Keys is brought to you by Faster Outcomes. Faster Outcomes is the ultimate legal intelligence platform for lawyers and law firms of all shapes and sizes, as you know. I want to thank you for joining us today. Can't wait, as I mentioned, to introduce my next guest. Debbie Foster is the CEO of Affinity Consulting Group, a legal consulting firm that helps law firms improve operations through strategy, technology, and change management. Most importantly, we're going to talk a lot about that today. Affinity has served thousands of law firms and specializes in helping firms increase efficiency, productivity, and profitability. Said short, make more money and have more fun. Who doesn't want to do that? Affinity has been around since 1998, and Debbie is one of the original co-founders. She works with firms on strategic initiatives where leading the company's team and partner relationships. Her background includes operations, leadership, and organizational change, making her a trusted advisor to firms who are trying to navigate technology, adoption, and business transformation, which is really what we're going to talk about today. She is widely recognized for her practical approach to helping law firms implement change, improve performance, and successfully integrate new technologies, including AI. Debbie, welcome to Legal Keys.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
This is going to be fun, and we're going to hold nothing back. So we're going to have a really cool conversation, and we're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about family law today. I think it'll be our main area of focus. And as my listeners know and guess, I tend to be very unstructured and free flow. Today, I wanted to be super disciplined. So I actually wrote a few questions. I want to make sure I don't miss them. And the first one was simple, right? So your bio speaks for itself. So there are a lot of family law firms that are looking at AI, right? And they're trying to decide. There's a lot of issues around that. What's kind of the general guidelines that you have for should we or should we not adopt AI? And what are some of the factors for consideration?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that the answer to the simple question, should we or shouldn't we, is of course you should. Of course you should. But the devil's in the details of what of course you should means, right? Every firm who is thinking about how to build a sustainable firm that travels well into the future is going to have to think about getting work done more efficiently. And AI is one of the ways that they can do that. And it's also a multiplier. Tim, you and I have had a previous conversation about how AI has changed not just how lawyers think about doing their jobs, but about how everyone thinks about doing their jobs. It is a tool that we would be crazy to just push aside and say, we're not going to do that. So the answer is, yes, you should do it. How should you do it? It's funny. I just posted something on LinkedIn that started off with, nobody wants a drill, and nobody actually wants the hole either. They just want to hang the shelf, right? And so I think that there is a lot of that conversation that is missing around AI adoption. And last year, there was an MIT study that said 95% of all AI projects fail. And I've seen that in my own journey working with law firms, that failure after failure after failure. And they don't fail because somebody bought a bad tool. They fail because nobody taught anyone how to use the tool. No one thought about the use case. You don't go to Home Depot, buy a drill, and then go walking around your house thinking like, where should I put a hole? Like, that's not what you do. And if that's your strategy, the drill is going to collect dust. But if you look at your wall and you're like, I need a television, I need a couple of shelves over there. Now, how am I going to make that happen? And then you start to think about the drill. But it's not just about the drill. It's about like, where on the wall can I hang an 80-inch television? Well, you need a stud and you need to know about the mechanics of the wall, right? You got to do some work to use the drill to create the hole to hang the television. The same thing is true with AI. yes, you should use it. But start with, where's the friction? What's hard? What takes longer than it needs to? What do my clients ask for over and over again? Start with that. Understand what the use case is instead of starting with the tool. And I think that's the big mistake people make. The last thing I want to say about that is I worked with a firm very recently who said, we were talking about AI. I said, do you have any other tools? And they're like, oh yeah, this is our 6th AI tool that we're investing in. And I said, your 6th AI tool? Why? What? Tell me more. What's going on? And the words that came out of that lawyer's mouth next was, the other 5 didn't work. I said, could you list them for me? And he rattled off the names of 5 products. 4 of them I knew, 1 of them I did not know. And what I knew about the 4 is that they absolutely do work.
Yeah.
And what I knew about the 6th that they were about to buy is that that one wasn't going to work either, because it was never actually about the tool. So yes, you should use it.
It sounds like they were trying to brush their teeth with a hammer.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But I love analogies. Like, we could just have a full day of analogies on this episode of your show. Yes.
It made sense. I love the Home Depot analogy. And so the next question came out of a conversation that you and I had around AI policies, right? The lack of an AI policy, the importance of an AI policy. I'm curious, for when you're consulting with folks, what are some of the elements that you include in it? Like the key stuff, not everything, the key stuff in an AI policy. And how do you feel about, to your point, the tools collecting dust, a law firm saying, well, part of our AI policy is that you have to use AI. So not just you can't use free ChatGPT, you can't use free Claude. We bought one, whatever it is,
Yeah.
agnostic. You got to use it, because just like case management, if you don't upload all the files, right? So I'm curious around your AI policy guidance.
When I think about AI policies, my mind immediately goes to how a policy is not enough. We need a policy and a strategy. The policy is about governance. It's about what you can do and what you can't do. It's about approved tools, and it's going to satisfy your malpractice provider. It's going to give you some legs to stand on when someone falls outside of the range of things that are allowed and not allowed. But the policy is very different than the strategy. Why are we adopting AI? What problems are we trying to solve? What do we want to make better for our lawyers and for our clients? And so I think for every firm thinking about policy and strategy, why does a policy exist? You should be having people sign off on your AI policy. It should be, if you add a new tool, that new tool should be very clearly named in your policy. There's this concept that a lot of people talk about around an audit trail, about how if you use AI when you're working on a case and something goes wrong, you need to be able to go back and trace what happened. I think that's valuable, but I think it's also a little bit overblown in some ways, because there is no audit trail for how legal work gets done right now. If you take AI out of the picture, right? Like, if a document gets created, a complex legal document gets created, and it's been in the hands of 4 people, you have some basic information about who touched it and who saved it, depending on what document management system you use. You don't really have an audit trail. So I am a believer in that, but I don't think that we should live and die on that mountain. I think the policy is really about governance. But strategy is where we start to get into the why, right? It's how we start to build the business case for the tool that should have a return on investment. It should make our lives a little bit easier. It should allow us to deliver better and faster services to our clients. But the strategy also puts into place the understanding that AI becomes a thing that lawyers have to manage, just like lawyers have to manage law clerks and associates, to manage AI too, right? And so there's a little bit of policy in that, and there's a little bit of strategy in that. And to get to that last question, I think that one of the things that I have started to see more and more in the last 6 months is when a law firm tries to mandate the use of AI, a lawyer can be very quick to go to, it's my license, you can't tell me how to practice. There's a very big difference from, in saying all of your documents must be uploaded to the document management system. There's a very, very big difference between an operational policy and you saying the only way you can prep for a deposition is if you start with an AI tool, right? There's a little weird nuance there. And so I don't think that we're ever going to mandate the use. I don't think that the use happens if we send out lots of emails. I don't think that we use AI just because we have a policy or a strategy. That happens when we, as leaders in a law firm, create believers. People who believe that there is a better way to get work done. You show them one thing that gets made easier, and you make a believer out of a lawyer, and a lawyer says, I wonder if I could also do this other thing, right? It's not an all or none thing. It's it's a ground game. It's not an error. We're not striking from the air. We're striking from the ground. It is desk to desk. So mandating the use of AI, I think, is just a terrible, terrible strategy that will fail in more cases than it succeeds.
That makes sense. So which would beg the natural question, people use the phrase a lot, change management, right? So now you've got a situation where the law firm has invested, right? And in some cases, a lot, right?
Significantly.
And
Yeah.
they're obviously looking for a return on that investment. So I think you just hit the first, like, kind of step one is, hey, try this. See how this makes your life a little better. Is there a step two and a step three? In other words, when you're encouraging, consulting a group, you say, hey, you might want to try these three things to get everybody to buy in. What is it that if you're okay sharing that,
Yeah,
like, what are
no,
the
for sure. I'll tell you anything. I'm an open book. So I'll use an example, a real example. So we're working with a firm right now that has about 75 lawyers. And as you can imagine, they're all over the spectrum of, I'm only on my last day on this earth am I using AI, to, the rogue wild, wild west guy who's got, God only knows what he's doing over there, and everything in between. And our job with them was to come in and help to build the use cases, right? And so I'll shortcut a very, very long story about the practice group meetings and the one-on-one lawyer meetings and the tell me what you're really worried about. I'm a third party. I'm leaving tomorrow. You can tell me what you're really worried
Yeah.
about. I'm going to help you navigate that. Where we ended up with that firm, they had already made a decision to invest in Copilot. So I'm not going to do a lot of name dropping of
Yeah.
products here, but they had invested in Copilot. So we took their skeptical lawyers and we did some Copilot training for the 5 or 6 of them that would come in, and we said, don't use it for your legal work. Use it to manage your day. Let's use Copilot in the Microsoft 365 world. Let's talk about how you would use it to manage your email. What is sitting in my inbox that I need to pay attention to? Help me organize my day today based on my calendar. We started with some really low-hanging fruit. And then for those middle-of-the-road lawyers who were like, I'm a little worried about this, but I'm interested, I'm intrigued, we said things like, what's something you do regularly? And so someone might have said, I prep for a lot of depots. And we were like, great, let's lean into some depot prep. Or someone else said, I file a lot of motions that are simple motions, and here's 3 that I use all the time. And we said, great. And we took another tool they were using. We built a little playbook, a very tiny little playbook. And we said, use this playbook. It's not just like them hearing it from a stage. They see these light bulbs. You see the light bulb, right? Like it's on the top of their head. You see it go off and they're like, that makes a lot of sense, right? And then you get into the power users. We did something for this firm where we said, they did a lot of landlord tenant work. We said, go get us your top 20 leases and let's build a lease playbook. And we took these leases, big, long story, very short, and we made this lease playbook that basically interviews them about the next lease they need. And they just look at it and they're like, what? This would have taken me 36 hours before, and I just did it in 4 hours, which then begs your next question. They're like, hang on a second. I used to be able to bill 36 hours for this, and now you're telling me I can do it in 4 hours, which that's a whole nother topic. We're going to get to that. But my point about the small, medium, large, right? What's easy, low-hanging fruit? Copilot, an Outlook, or something simple. Maybe your firm's invested in Claude Enterprise, and it's not about creating your legal documents. It's using AI as a thought partner. What if I just had you sparring with AI to process the facts of a case, and you look back and go, that's really interesting. I don't know that I would have thought about it like that. So we do low-hanging fruit, and then what's middle of the road stuff, and then who's ready for the complex stuff. And we really just try to meet people where they are to get those use cases so they can tell a story. Because then what happens is you're kind of walking through a lunchroom and you hear a lawyer say, I was with those consultants in there and they showed me this really cool thing. And now all of a sudden you've built a coalition of people who are out there preaching the gospel of this one little thing. And that spreads like wildfire, way better than a mandate from above.
No, that makes total sense. So one of my favorite stories about change management, and I think I had mentioned to you that I work with Rob Levine as a customer, and a lot of people don't realize Rob is running an organization with almost 500 employees, consultants. And when he started thinking about AI adoption, 9 months ago, they were in that camp, right? So he got a very well-established older group in his pre-litigation, and they were the no AI. And one of the things that I said to Rob, I'm like, well, why don't you just tell him to do it? And he said, I'm not going to do that. He said, the only way that we're going to get lasting adoption, meaningful, full adoption, is you have to get them to believe. And it's got to be a process. And if I just go in a room and tell them, this is what we're going to do, they're going to revolt and they're
100%.
not going to do it. And I thought it was an amazing take on it, and brave. As I said, he's an investor. He's a customer. He's vested. He's like, that's not how it's going to work. So it was a great lesson that I learned. And I think philosophically, it sounds like you and Rob are very much in alignment on your comments around mandate, right? Having mandates that say you got to do this. And so I think that's great.
Let me just say one thing. Well, let me say two things about that. The first thing I'll say is, if I'm painting with a very broad brushstroke, this is not true for every lawyer, but lawyers generally are skeptical. That is part of their training, right? They're questioning things. And in addition to skepticism, they really value autonomy. So if you show up with a thing that is unknown and a mandate, those are two like nails on a chalk kinds of things. So there are just better ways to get that done. And the other thing that I want to say, because you pointed out earlier, faster outcomes, you are a vendor, you have a software product, you want to sell software, but also you want people to use your software because you don't want them to churn when their renewal comes up.
100%.
And so that, right, like that, you have to work twice as hard to fill that. If you're bringing people on and people are falling off on the other end, that's a problem. And so user adoption and change management are an essential part of a software company's strategy too. You want people using the tools. If they're using the tools, they're much more likely to renew.
Well said, and amen. I think that's the key. Now, one of the challenges we have, although it's funny, one of the fastest growing segments in our business in terms of new acquisitions is in family law. And it's interesting, right? But you and I had this conversation a little bit about family law, AI, and the billable hour. What is your take on that? How are you advising your clients? You have many, hey, you should be aware of this, but hey, this is really cool.
Well, I have 50 thoughts about it. So let me just give them to you in no order of importance. So first of all, many, many lawyers have spent 15 minutes with a client and saved them $10,000, $100,000, or $1 million or more, right? And when they hang up that call and they put in a 0.2 or a 0.3, I think we could all argue that call was much more valuable than whatever their hourly rate times 0.2 or 0.3 is. So if we just start with that premise, that the value that a lawyer provides to their client is often far exceeds the line item on the invoice. Just throw that out there as food for thought. The second thing that I would say is the reason why the billable hour is like a cockroach that is never going to die is because we all clearly understand what it means. It's 60 minutes of time. No one can argue, right? It is that. And so it has a long, long life and will have a long life. And actually, there are places where I think the billable hour is always going to make sense. But if we now apply it to the efficiencies that are created with AI, I would challenge people to think about a couple of different things. Number one, if I say to you, this tool is going to let you do this thing in 1 hour. And you say to me, I don't really love that, Debbie, because I can bill 5 hours for that right now. I might say to you, well, if you throw your computer away and you buy paper, carbon paper, and bust out a typewriter, that thing could take you 10 hours instead of 5. So why don't, if the whole goal is maximizing how long it takes, you could make it take longer. And that's absurd. And people laugh
Right.
when I say that from a stage. They're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And my point about that is, it is just as absurd 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 6 months from now, however long from now, when you try to bill someone 5 hours for something that you could do one, it's going to be just as absurd as my example of grabbing a typewriter and carbon paper.
Well
That's
said.
where we're going. And so then you say to a lawyer, like, gosh, how do you solve that economic problem, right? Because you are truly spending 5 hours doing valuable, important work for your client. If you bill $200 an hour, let's just make the math easy, that's $1,000. And now it's only going to take you an hour, and that's $200. So what you would then say to me is, so I have to do that thing 5 times to make the same amount of money? And I would say, no, actually 6 times. Because you
Yeah.
have to pay for the tool. So it's actually more than that. You have to do it more than that. And then they're just like, well, why would I ever do this? And what I would say is some work should just be done more efficiently. That is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for you. It's the right thing to do for your client. Some work shouldn't be priced by the hour. Some work should be priced based on the value that it brings your client. A million years ago, I don't know, like 15 years ago, something like that. Oddly enough, I was at a monastery in Boston, and I was there with about 12 family law attorneys and a criminal defense lawyer. And one of the family law attorneys said to me, I've never billed by the hour. Somebody comes in my office, I ask them a bunch of questions, and then I say, $50,000. That's how much it's going to cost. And I decide that based on the value of their assets, how complex their situation is.
Yep.
And I say to them, $50,000 through mediation. If we go to trial, it's a whole different thing, right? It can be done, but it's hard. And it requires us to think differently. And this can't be for this podcast episode because it'll go on for another day and a half. But the real challenge that law firms are facing is the economic model. Like now, we're not just talking about what you're charging your client. We're talking about how much money you make. Lawyers are
Right.
paid based on origination and production. Largely. I mean, there's other things that factor into it, and that's all about the billable hour. And when we hire a new associate, we're like, welcome to our firm. You must bill 1,600 hours. Well, wait a second. What if we start doing this value billing thing? How does the associate get credit for the thing that we're going to charge $1,000 for that only took that associate an hour? How am I going to get credit for that? I originated the business. All of a sudden, we have like 10,000 questions that we didn't have to answer before when we just billed everything by
Right.
the hour. So those are my thoughts randomly.
And they're all good. They all make sense, right? And, I've been hanging around the legal system now for going on 2 years, and people were talking about this 2 years ago, like it was going to happen tomorrow, right? So, and the
I
people
got
that were talking about it 2 years ago have said, we've been talking about this forever.
I have an article I have very few pieces of paper left in my life because I'm not a paper person. I
Yeah.
have a piece of paper. I have an article. I think the publication date is 1984 about the death of the billable hour that was in an article in the ABA journal. So it
Yeah.
like a cockroach. It's
Yeah.
going to be here for a while.
I've got a lot of thoughts. Again, I'm more interested in your thoughts today. I think this is great. And, by way of review, you can do it, right? And the argument is, hey, there's certain things that you can do with AI that are great. Now, I will say in looking at the use case, and we're talking about family law, the use cases that we see from family lawyers, it's going far and beyond, right? It's more scenario based now, right?
Yeah.
Critical thinking. So, which is good because you can use AI, as you know, any AI, it doesn't matter what AI, to analyze, aggregate, right? Simple. You analyze the information, you get a summary, timeline, detailed facts, and then you get, the basic information that you want. It can highlight things. But what we see from more further down the road, family lawyers is using it as a strategist and using the tool to say, okay, if you're the judge in this case, those types of queries, right? And then also, you'd mentioned a bunch of times playbooks, relying on playbooks, right? There's 8 sequences in a divorce, in a dissolution of marriage, right? These are the 8 sequences. And you can, like with anything, you can create a playbook that you can take the playbook of a 20-year litigator and give it to an associate with oversight, and they can do different things. So topic for another day, but what we see now is way more advanced. My goal is 70-30 custody. My goal is X amount of percentage of the marital assets, my goal. And then they ask AI, what do I need to do? What are the most critical steps I need to take in the next 30 days to achieve the goals for my client? And then they get this friend helping them, right? So I think it's morphing a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see how all that impacts the billable hour. But I do appreciate the conversation. And like I said, what's interesting is the number of lawyers who navigate that. And you said something the other day too, that a well-run family law firm, they're busy, right? They've got a lot to do. And a lot of times the ceiling is capacity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if they could expand capacity, then they can figure out the economics of it. So great conversation. Now, the other question I had was as it relates to success stories. So you deal with a lot of people that they come to you, like you said, they're on their spectrum in the sense that one is, I'm never doing that. The other one is, how are we not using this for everything? Walk me through how you would take a skeptical, a group run by a skeptic, and how you would get them through that transformation.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before about like what is the low hanging fruit and where is the risk low. And for me, I often want to dig in and understand a little bit more about why someone is hesitant. Sometimes it's all about like identity. This is my craft and this is what I do. Sometimes it's about being worried about missing something. Like I built the house, so I know exactly how the bricks were laid. If I just tell it I need a house built and it spits it out to me, how do I like reverse engineer that? So I think that for me, getting to that success story, I want to understand why my skeptics are skeptical. And then I'm going to start with something that is low risk for them. I'm going to dig in a little bit. Like, would you feel comfortable if we triaged your inbox? Would you feel comfortable if we just did like some drafts of depot prep documents? Would you feel comfortable if we did an initial review of this financial information, right? So I'm not saying you must use it for your entire case. I'm saying, what if we did it on this one little thing, right? I think that it is also really valuable. And some of the successes that we've had have been by working with practice groups. So 3 or 4 people from a practice group come into a room and we say, all right, who's already using it? And someone will tell a story and you'll see another lawyer say, well, what? Tell me more about that. I didn't know you could do, right? And so now we're socializing the message, right? Their peers are using it. And I'm sure you've seen this, especially being in the software sales business. People call you and they're like, I was at a meeting yesterday and this lawyer told me that they use your thing. Can you tell me what that is, right?
Yep.
Social proof is huge. And so we're trying to do that in law firms. We're trying to do that outside of law firms. We're trying to do that on podcasts. We're trying to do that from the stage. You don't have to give up who you are as a lawyer. These are tools to help you. They can be multipliers. They can let you sleep better at night, let you make it to a soccer game that you weren't going to make it to. And is it going to change the economics of a law firm? Yes, it is going to change it. But it doesn't have to be a table flip. And it can be done if you do it methodically and thoughtfully, and you find small successes along the way.
I think that's great advice. Certainly my instincts tell me you'll hear that coming from this guy a couple more times.
Yeah.
I agree, right? I agree. And it's my take on it is a little different too, because I'm a non-lawyer. So I look at it as a guy who's been around technology for a long time. And I'm like, wait, all things become more efficient. It's just how the world works, right?
Yeah.
This world's working a little bit slower, but that's okay. And
Yeah.
so I knew I was going to enjoy this conversation today. I love your insights. And as we start to wind down, so what do you see like next 12 months? What do you see as any significant changes around AI adoption? What's the next shoe to drop kind of thing? And how are you and your teams consulting law firms, family law firms in particular?
Let's see. So I think that we are going to see more and more legal AI built into practice management and document management solutions. We're already seeing that to some degree, but more and more we're going to see that. I think that information governance is going to become more and more important. People understanding what their data contains. So, we're working with a firm right now who has all of their electronic discovery mashed together with their work product. They want to use an AI tool on all of their data, but it's not all their data. It's a lot of data that isn't really their work product. So information governance and really thinking about how do you leverage your data, I think there's going to be a big focus on that. I think Claude is doing some super interesting things. ChatGPT, Anthropic is doing cool things. OpenAI is a little bit further behind them. What we've seen with Copilot in the last 4 months is like mind-blowing compared to the year or two before that. the solutions like faster outcomes, the point solutions that are legal specific tools are like the feature sets are getting to be bigger and bigger, and more lawyers are relying on those solutions. I think that law firms are recognizing that they're not betting on a single horse, that they are going to have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 AI tools that they use to do different kinds of work. And it's going to just be the cost of doing business. I think that there's going to be more and more conversations about how are we going to train young lawyers. I think there's a big opportunity there in lawyers that have been practicing for more than 10 or 15 or 20 years, really thinking about these new lawyers coming in from law school who have had AI in their hands for a couple of years. How are you really going to train them to have that professional lawyer judgment? It's going to be different how we do that. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to be facing in the next 12 months.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's
Great
exciting.
time to be alive.
It's so fun. Real quick, and then we want to hear about what you got coming up. So as it relates to information governance, we actually did this really cool project, and the Bar Association executive director was largely responsible for the concept of capturing all of the association's intellectual property, putting that into a knowledge base, and then with the right permissions, allowing 800 lawyers in this association to be able to go through every PowerPoint, all the CLEs, with you got to pay your dues and all that, all their CLEs, any case data they have. It was a really cool project, and they're going to be the initial rollout. We're expecting 500 lawyers to be able to get access to what the association put into a knowledge environment. And they were smart. This woman was forward thinking. She said, you know what we need to do? We need to put everything that we have into one location that with a simple password that everybody can make it accessible. It's the coolest project in the world. One I want to talk to you more about. But with that being said, so what's coming up for Affinity and Debbie over the next 3 to 6 months? You going to any shows? And also, if folks were interested in your perspective today, they hear it and they want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yes. So, of course, the big show that is coming up that is in August is ILTA. And that is, one of the biggest shows for us, the International Legal Technology Association. So we will be there. I'm speaking at ILTA. I have lots of things coming up for me, I speak about, 50, 75 times a year on a stage, on a webinar. On my LinkedIn profile, I really try to share everything that's kind of publicly available. So I have a 2-part webinar series coming up on AI policy and strategy that I'm doing with Centerbase and NetDocuments, 2 of our partners. So lots of opportunity there in LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with your listeners on LinkedIn, talk a lot about what I think on LinkedIn. Yep. Some say maybe more than it should. But I really do try to share information and also stay connected to people who are really thinking in a forward, progressive way about what's happening in the legal industry. Even the ones that I think are kind of crazy, I want to know what they're saying, right? We've got to know what's going on out there.
Yeah. Smart. And what's the website?
affinityconsulting.com. And my email address is dfoster@affinityconsulting.com. And, if you search Debbie Foster on LinkedIn, you'll find me pretty easy.
And I hope they do. And anyone listening, they shoot you an email, ask you a question, and easy.
I'd love that.
Well, listen, you've been great with your time. I'm super appreciative for you spending some time with us today. I know this is going to be great for our family law listeners, but really for everyone who follows Legal Keys. And we will continue to try to get great guests like Debbie. And by the way, Debbie, if you know someone you think would be a great contributor to the conversation, let's keep it going and build this incredible network and try to be a great informational resource. At the end of the day, yes, I am part of a group that sells AI technology. We hope to sell a lot of it at fasteroutcomes.com, simple plug, fasteroutcomes.com. Check us out. But I also want to be part of the broader community and be part of the discussion. And I'm grateful that we were able to go from what started out with, I said, me and this gal, I don't know. I don't know.
It's okay.
And turns out to be
many others have thought that too.
Turns out to be one of the best meetings I had of the year. We want to thank Debbie. We want to thank Affinity for sharing her time with us today. We continue to ask everyone to follow Legal Keys. And like I said, visit Faster Outcomes at fasteroutcomes.com. And we encourage everyone to continue to listen and have a great week.
Thanks, Tim.